Lesson 73, Rationalizing Denominators. Now, we've learned before how to multiply by the conjugate. So this is just a little bit more advanced or more difficult, but you will see that it's pretty easy. Remember, we learned that we have to multiply by the conjugate. The conjugate, if you remember, is when we have a plus b, the conjugate is a minus b. When we do that and we multiply, that is a difference of squares, and so we're going to get a squared minus b squared. And this is really important because this is what we're going to be using to simplify the denominator. So let's multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. Notice, I'm not saying anything about the numerator. We're going to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So instead of a minus, I'm going to put a plus 3 square root of 3. And whatever I multiply on the bottom, I also multiply on the top. And this is a 1. This whole thing is a special 1, we call it. Because we are multiplying times 1, that is 1. One thing divided by itself is 1, so that is a 1. So we're not changing the value of the fraction, we're changing how it looks. So in the denominator, it's going to be very, very easy. We're just going to grab the first one, square, minus the second one, square. And then on the top, we're going to multiply. But notice that we have to multiply the 4 plus square root of 3 times the 2 plus 3 square root of 3. So we have to do distributive property 2 times. So let's start. 4 times 2 is 8. And 4 times 3, square root of 3, is 12 square root of 3. Then we multiply the 2 times the square root of 3, which is 2 square root of 3. And then the square root of 3 times 3 square root of 3, which in that case is going to be 3 square root of 9. In the top, we have to multiply 1 with each other, but in the denominator, we're going to use this formula, and we're just going to use the a squared minus the b squared, because we know that's what it's going to be. It's a formula that we're using to simplify our lives. So when we simplify that, we have to do the top, which is 8 plus 12 square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 3 is 14 square root of 3. And then we have to simplify that square root of 9. So 3 times the square root of 9 is 3. So we multiply times 3. In the bottom, we have to simplify that as well. So we have 2 squared, which is 4, minus 3 squared is 9. And then the square root of 3 squared is the square root of 9, which is 3. So it's 9 times 3, 27. Now remember, this is always a minus because of the formula here. It's always a difference. Then we just have to simplify here. We have 3 times 3 is 9, plus 8 is 17, plus 14 square root of 3. And then in the denominator, we have 4 minus 27, which is negative 23. Now remember, we never leave the negative in the denominator, so we're going to rewrite that with a minus, and I'll just apply that negative to both of the numbers on the top, over 23, and that's our answer. Let's look at another example. Again, in this case, we have to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. And the conjugate of the denominator is 4 minus 3 square root of 2. And we're going to multiply the top by the same number. When we do that, we multiply the top. And remember, we do 4 times 4, which is 16. 4 times negative 3 square root of 2, which is negative 12 square root of 2. Then negative square root of 2 times 4, which is negative 4 square root of 2. And then negative times negative, positive, and square root of 2 times 3 square root of 2 is 3 square root of 4. Then in the denominator is even easier. We just put the first one square minus, always minus, 3 square root of 2 squared. When we simplify that, remember that we're going to have 16 minus, and we add 12 minus 4. Negative 12 minus 4 is negative 16 square root of 2 because they're like terms. And then that other one we can simplify. The square root of 4 is 2, so we just put a 2. Remember, the square root of 4 is 2, not square root of 2. It's just a 2 without the square root, without the radical. And then in the bottom, we're going to have 16 minus, and again, that is 3 squared is 9, and then square root of 2 square is 2, and 9 times 2 is 18. Again, we multiply and add, so 3 times 2 is 6, plus 16 is 22, minus 16 square root of 2. And then in the denominator, we're going to have negative 2 because 16 minus 18 is negative 2. Now notice that both the 22 and the 16 are divisible by 2. So we're going to divide. And we've done this before where we divide kind of like in a heart shape. So we're going to divide these two and we're going to divide these two. If I divide 22 divided by negative 2, the answer is negative 11. And if I divide negative 16 divided by negative 2, the answer is positive 8 square root of 2. Notice how the signs change. And in this case, we have no denominator because it cancels by dividing. Let's do one last example. In this case, what we have here is a little bit different, a square root that has a number that we can simplify or just work in the same way and simplify at the end. I'm going to suggest right now that you multiply and work in the same way we've been working and then just simplify at the end. So in this case, the conjugate of the denominator is 3 square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 2. Now you have to be very careful because there are so many radicals that you can get confused. So make sure that you're copying correctly. Again, remember that we don't care about what is in the numerator. What we care is the conjugate of the denominator. Okay, so I'm going to just write here what we get with the formula of the difference of squares. So it's the first one, that is 3 square root of 3 squared, minus the second one square. Now remember to use parentheses because if not, even the calculator will get confused on what to do. Okay? Now, in the top, why don't we do it, since this is a big one, why don't we do it here on the side? So we're going to multiply these. So if I multiply the first two is 9 square root of 36. If I multiply 3 square root of 12 times 2 square root of 2 is 6 square root of 24. Then negative 2 square root of 3 times 3 is negative 6 square root of 9. And negative 2 square root of 3 times 2 square root of 2 is negative 4 square root of 6. Now we have to simplify. And here we have 9 times 6 because the square root of 36 is 6. And then 9 times 6 is 54. Then the square root of 24, we can simplify as 4 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. Remember, you have to look for one that is a perfect square. And then if we simplify these, that's going to be 6 times 2 square root of 6 because the square root of 4 is 2. Then we have 6 times the square root of 9, which the square root of 9 is 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. Don't forget the signs. Be careful with the signs. And then the square root of 6 that we cannot simplify. So we're going to have 54 minus 18, which is 36. And then 6 times 2 is 12, and 12 minus 4 is 8 square root of 6. And that's our answer for the top. So I'll put it here. Notice that this was a lot of process. So that's why it was good to do it on the side and then continue with the process here, very organized. So the top is already simplified. And then the bottom, we have to simplify that. And again, is 3 squares 9. Here, let's even write it so that it's very clear. 9 and the square root of 3 square is the square root of 9. So that's times 3. Minus the 2 square, which is 4, times the square root of 4, which is 2. I rewrite the top again. And then on the bottom, we're going to have 27 minus 8. 27 minus 8 is 19. And in this case, it's positive 19. So we don't have to worry about the negative. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Pretty simple. Notice that we cannot reduce both the 36 and the 8 by 19. So we just leave it like that. And that's it. That's the lesson. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And if not, I'll see you in the next video.